He saw his wife dead on the beach with another man and decided to follow her. What he discovered stunned him. Hello, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Jake was walking along the beach at dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the clouds, tinting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The soft sound of the waves breaking on the sand was like a familiar melody, an echo of past moments that now seemed so far away. As he moved slowly, the cool sea breeze brought with it not only the salty smell of the water, but also vivid memories of his beloved Laura. He closed his eyes for a moment, and in his mind, the image of her appeared. Laughing, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes shining with joy. "Oh, Laura, how I miss you," Jake murmured, his voice choked with longing. As he continued his walk, his memories floated from one moment to the next. He remembered how Laura loved to picnic on the beach, how she always brought an infectious smile that brightened even the gloomiest of days. "Can't you see the beauty in every moment, Jake?" she used to ask, while holding a shell in her hand and showing it to him as if it were a treasure. He remembered how he used to respond with a nod, admiring not just the shell, but her passion for life. Suddenly, Jake stopped abruptly. His heart raced when he spotted a familiar female silhouette in the distance. The figure was laughing and joking with an unknown man, and the resemblance to Laura was undeniable. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was dreaming. It can't be, he thought, his mind conflicted between hope and despair. Laura can't be alive. Not after everything that's happened. But the scene before him was so vivid, so real, that he couldn't look away. "Laura?" he murmured, almost in a whisper, as if saying her name out loud would break the illusion. The sound of their laughter echoed in his ears, and each laugh felt like a dagger driven into his heart. He felt torn, caught between the need to get closer and the fear of what he might discover. But curiosity was stronger than reason. Without a second thought, he began to follow the pair across the sand, his feet heavy and his chest tight. Tears began to stream down his face as he fought against the tide of emotions that swept over him. "Why are you doing this, Jake?" he wondered aloud, feeling like a spectator of his own life. "You know it doesn't make sense." But the image of Laura, so alive and full of joy, pulled him like a magnet. He wanted to believe that she was really there, that death wasn't the end, that it wasn't all just a cruel mirage created by his tormented mind. As the distance between them decreased, Jake began to notice details. The way she moved, the way her hair danced in the wind. Everything seemed so familiar, so loved. But the man next to her, with his easy smile and affectionate gaze, made Jake's heart squeeze even tighter. Who is he? What does he represent? The questions piled up in his mind, each one more distressing than the last. Jake hesitated for a moment, doubt weighing on his shoulders. But the determination to find out the truth pushed him to take a step forward. "Laura, I need answers. I need to understand," he thought, unaware that this encounter on the beach would take him on a journey that would change his life forever. The loneliness and pain he had been carrying had found a new purpose, and he was about to dive into a world of dark secrets that would challenge not only his perception of Laura, but also his own morality. Jake returned home, his heart heavy, as if an invisible burden followed him with every step he took. The image of Laura, laughing on the beach with an unknown man, still pulsed in his mind. Like an open wound, he couldn't understand what he had seen, but a spark of determination began to take shape inside him. The pain of loss turned into a desperate search for answers. As soon as he entered the house, the familiarity of the space enveloped him, but Laura's absence was palpable. Everything there seemed to echo her absence. He began going through Laura's things, moving objects carefully, as if he feared breaking some memory. The scent of her perfume still hung in the air, and it made him hesitate for a moment. "Why did you have to leave me, Laura?" he murmured, his voice breaking. With a deep sigh, he decided that he needed to understand more about her life before her death. The first place to explore was her studio, a space that had always been full of color and creativity, but now seemed as empty as her heart. Jake opened his desk drawer and found a box of memorabilia covered in dust. As he opened it, he felt a mixture of nostalgia and unease. Inside were photos of Laura with friends he didn't recognize. The pictures captured moments of joy, wide smiles and complicit glances. He went through the photos carefully. Each one seemed to tell a story he didn't know. "Who are these people, Laura? What haven't you told me?" he asked aloud, as if his wife could answer. One photo in particular caught his eye. In it, Laura was in a gallery, surrounded by elements that looked artistic, but which he couldn't identify. The most intriguing thing was a symbol that was displayed in the background, an emblem of an artistic group that Jake had never known existed. He frowned and bit his lower lip, feeling his curiosity and suspicion growing by the moment. "What were you doing, love? What were you hiding from me?" he thought, his mind racing. Jake began to put the pieces together, but each discovery seemed to raise more questions than answers. He sat in a worn chair, the photos scattered around him, as he tried to understand what was going on. The idea that Laura might have a secret life bothered him. He had always thought he knew every part of her, that they were one, and now he found himself facing an abyss of uncertainty. The front door creaked, and he turned as he heard a noise. It was only the wind, but the feeling that something was about to be revealed made him uneasy. Maybe I should talk to someone who knew her better, he thought, twisting the idea that searching for answers could be a path to healing. He decided that he needed to get in touch with Laura's friends, those he didn't know but who appeared in the photos. "I need to find out the truth, even if it costs me everything," Jake declared to himself as he looked out of the window at the sea, the waves breaking on the distant beach. The sea had always been a reflection of his emotions, but now it seemed more turbulent than ever. He felt that his wife's life was intertwined with secrets that could change the way he remembered her. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. The questions tormented him, and he got out of bed. Like a man possessed, he picked up a notebook and began to write down his findings. Laura was involved in something bigger, he scribbled, the pen sliding frantically across the paper. Why didn't she ever tell me? What happened to those friends? The questions piled up, and Jake felt like a detective searching for clues that would lead him to a truth that seemed more and more distant. So he prepared himself for the next stage of his investigation. It was time to confront Laura's past, even if it meant shattering the perfect image he'd always had of her. "I promised you that I would never forget you, Laura, and I won't rest until I find out who you really were," he murmured, determined, his gaze fixed on the horizon as the sun began to rise again, heralding a new day full of uncertainty. One rainy afternoon, Jake found himself surrounded by the melancholy that permeated his home. The raindrops drummed on the windows, creating an almost mesmerizing sound that made him reflect on his life without Laura. He sat down at the studio table where he used to spend hours painting alongside her. But now, everything seemed to be an echo of painful memories. His mind wandered back and forth between the moments he had shared with his wife, and, in the midst of these memories, something caught his eye. A small diary, hidden in a drawer, revealed itself as an object of curiosity and pain. Jake hesitated for a moment, feeling a knot in his stomach. "What if I don't like what I find?" he thought. However, curiosity was stronger than fear. With trembling hands, he pulled out the diary and opened it. The pages were yellowed, and Laura's handwriting danced before his eyes. He began to read, each word a connection to the woman he loved, but soon the atmosphere changed. The first few pages contained poetic verses that reflected Laura's soul, but as she progressed, the tone became darker. One poem in particular caught his eye. A secret love I cannot reveal, hidden in the shadows, where the light cannot reach me. Jake felt his heart race. What does that mean? He repeated to himself, unable to process the implications of those words. He remembered how Laura had always been open about her feelings, and this revelation felt like a stab in the chest. It can't be true, he muttered to himself, his voice almost cracking. Laura loved me. She would never betray me. However, doubt was beginning to creep into his mind like a weed, and he felt suffocated by it. Closing the diary abruptly, Jake stood up and began pacing back and forth in the studio, his thoughts in a whirl. It was at that moment that he heard a soft voice, almost like a whisper, echoing in his mind, as if Laura were there, trying to comfort him. Jake, please don't judge me without understanding. There are things you don't know. He shook his head, trying to dispel the illusion. No, it can't be real. I need to know the truth. Seized by the urgency to understand what was really going on, Jake decided that he needed to investigate further. He looked at the diary again and felt the need to find out not only what was written there, but what Laura had experienced in her last days. Where else have you hidden secrets, Laura? He asked aloud, as if she could hear. He sat down again, opening the diary in search of more clues, but the pain was intense. Why can't you be clear with me? Why didn't you tell me about this secret love? The words echoed in her mind, an echo of despair and confusion. The diary was like a window onto a world he didn't know, and every page he turned was like tearing open a wound that would never heal. I need to know the truth, he said, determined. If there's something I need to understand, I'll find out. Jake tucked the diary away in his heart, but the uncertainty persisted, like a shadow that followed him at every step. He knew that the journey he had chosen would not be easy. The pain of betrayal could be the least of his problems. He looked out of the window at the rain falling non-stop and remembered Laura's silhouette on the beach, laughing next to an unknown man. If you're really alive, I'm going to find you, no matter what it takes. The weight of the diary in his hand became heavier and heavier, but at the same time, it was a symbol of hope and determination. Jake took a deep breath, determined to face whatever came next, even if it meant confronting the most painful truth of all. Jake decided that he needed to know more about Laura's life, beyond what he already knew. What he had discovered in her diary had left him distressed and filled with doubt. So he decided to visit a local gallery that Laura used to frequent in the hope of finding more information that would help him understand the secrets surrounding his wife. As he entered the gallery, the smell of paint and the soft sound of ambient music welcomed him, but the feeling of sadness followed him like a shadow. While she was looking at the works on display, a figure caught her eye. It was Clara, a rebellious artist whom Laura admired. Jake hesitated before approaching, but the need for answers was stronger. With a shy smile, he greeted her. "Hi, Clara, do you remember me? I'm Jake, Laura's husband." Clara's gaze changed instantly, a mixture of recognition and compassion. "Jake, of course, I'm so sorry for your loss." Laura was an incredible person. I'm trying to understand more about her. What do you know about what she did? The question came out of his mouth with more urgency than he intended, but he needed answers. Clara hesitated for a moment, looking around as if she feared someone might overhear. Laura was involved in some, shall we say, alternative exhibitions. She and some friends were criticizing certain things that weren't right in our society. Secret exhibitions, you know. Many people didn't understand, but she believed that art could bring about change. Jake was perplexed. secret exhibitions. How do you know that? She told me a few times. It was something very important to her. She wanted to use art as a form of protest. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness. But things got dangerous. Laura was receiving threats. And well, you know what happened. Jake's heart raced. Are you saying that her death might not have been an accident? His voice trembled, the anguish growing with every word. I can't say anything, Jake. But she was in danger. What she was doing was risky. There were people who didn't want the truth to come out. Clara looked directly into Jake's eyes, searching for some answer in his gaze. She was fighting for something she believed in, and that put her at risk. Clara's words echoed in Jake's mind, bringing with them an avalanche of emotions. The memories of Laura, her laugh, her way of seeing the world, all of this was now mixed with the idea that she could have been in danger, involved in something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Why haven't you told me this before? He asked, frustration evident in his voice. Because I didn't know how. I thought it was better that you didn't know. And honestly, I didn't want to believe that it could happen to her. Clara looked away, as if remembering moments she would rather forget. Jake felt a mixture of anger and pain. If he'd known, maybe I could have done something. I should have protected her. Jake, you can't blame yourself. Laura was a strong woman, and she made her choices. What you can do now is honor her memory, find out the truth, and if possible, continue your fight. Clara spoke with a determination that caught Jake's attention. He took a deep breath, absorbing everything Clara had revealed. The pain of loss was mixed with a new determination. I need to understand all this. If Laura was fighting, I should fight too. I can't let the truth die with her. Clara nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. That's what Laura would like you to do. Her art, her ideas. All this needs to be shared. You're not alone in this. Jake felt a spark of hope ignite in his heart. He knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but now there was a purpose. He was determined to find out the truth about Laura, not just for himself, but to honor the fight she fought in life. With the help of Clara and other artists who also admired Laura, Jake was ready to embark on a new mission to give voice to the truth and the memory of the woman he loved. Jake, immersed in his investigation into Laura's secret life, began to realize that the consequences of his search for the truth could be darker than he had imagined. The nights in his house became increasingly restless. The loneliness that had once been his only companion was now also accompanied by a growing sense of threat. It was as if Laura's presence was still around him, but in a distorted form, like a shadow following him. One morning, when he opened the door to get the newspaper, Jake found a torn note, crumpled and thrown on the floor. He crouched down, his hand trembling slightly as he touched it. The words were written in red pen, in hasty handwriting. Stop looking. You don't know what you're doing. With each letter, his heart raced. He looked around, but the street was empty, and the cold sea breeze seemed to whisper warnings. The note was a blow to his resolve. That evening, while he was trying to distract himself with the painting, he felt a sense of being watched. Jake got up and from the back of his house looked out of the window. The moonlight illuminated the beach, and it was then that he noticed a man standing in the distance, close to where he had seen Laura. The man didn't move, he just watched. Jake felt a wave of anxiety. Who was this stranger? What did he want? Over the next few days, the man's presence became more frequent. In a moment of courage, Jake decided to go out and investigate. As he walked along the beach, He noticed the man following him, always keeping a safe distance. Jake's heart was pounding, and adrenaline was pulsing through his veins. He turned abruptly, facing the stranger. "What do you want from me?" Jake shouted, his voice echoing in the solitude of the beach. The man hesitated, but then approached with a serious look on his face. "You need to stop." "You don't know what you're getting into," he warned, his voice low and serious. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you? What do you know about Laura?" He was determined to get answers, even if it meant confronting a stranger. "I'm not your enemy," the man replied, looking away as if he feared being overheard. "I was trying to protect Laura. She got herself into something dangerous, and now you're in the middle of it." The revelation of the man's words made Jake's stomach turn. Protect Laura? But she's dead. Pain and anger exploded inside him. "That's not how things work," said the man, with a tone of urgency. "You need to understand that her death was no accident. There was much more at stake than you realize." Jake sensed the truth in the stranger's words, but the pain of loss prevented him from accepting it. "If you know something, you have to tell me," Jake begged, his voice laced with emotion. The man looked out to sea, thoughtful. "I can't talk here. It's too risky. But if you really want to know the truth, you have to follow me. We can't be exposed." Jake hesitated, wondering if he could trust this stranger who seemed to know more about Laura than he did. But the need for answers was overwhelming. He agreed, with a knot in his stomach. After the meeting, Jake locked himself in the house, thoughts swirling in his mind. What should he do? Continue his search for the truth, or protect himself? The thought of putting the investigation to one side was unbearable, but the threat hanging over him was real. He looked at Laura's photos, each one bringing back memories of happiness and love, but now also of secrets and uncertainty. The weight of the decision crushed him. As the night wore on, Jake sat in front of the blank screen, his mind in a whirl. He knew that whatever he decided, life would never be the same. The search for the truth had become a journey not only to discover who Laura was, but also who he was without her. Loneliness embraced him, but the determination to understand what had really happened to his wife kept him on his toes. With every beat of his heart, he felt closer to a dark but inevitable path. Jake felt his heart beating like a drum in his chest as he prepared for the confrontation that would change his life. The man who had followed him, a stranger wearing a dark coat, looked more like a shadow than a real person. He approached, the determination in his gaze overshadowing the fear that consumed him. "Are you following me?" Jake asked, his voice shaky but firm. Anger and confusion mixed in his mind as he tried to understand the presence of that man in his life. The stranger stopped and stared at him, the tension between them palpable. "I'm not your enemy, Jake. In fact, I'm here to protect Laura's memory." Jake shook his head in denial. "Protect? How can you protect someone who's dead?" The words came out as a desperate whisper, as if each syllable was a stab to his heart. "Laura didn't die the way you think. It was an accident, but there were forces at play that put her at risk before that." The man seemed genuine. The concern in his gaze was undeniable. "What do you know about her?" Jake demanded, feeling his body stiffen with anger and confusion. "Who are you?" "My name is Daniel, and I'm an undercover agent." Laura was involved in an art movement that criticized the government. Those secret exhibitions you discovered. They were more than art. They were a form of resistance. He paused, searching for the right words. "She was in danger, Jake. I was there to make sure she was safe." Jake shook his head, trying to process the information. "It doesn't make sense. If you were there to protect her, why didn't you succeed?" "There were limitations. The situation was delicate, and Laura was so passionate about her art that she didn't realize how much she was risking. When she started receiving threats, I tried to intervene, but Daniel's voice faltered momentarily, as if the memory was too heavy. And then what happened, happened. Are you saying that her death was an accident? Jake asked, hope beginning to well up in his chest, although he was skeptical. Yes, a tragic accident. Laura was trying to expose something bigger, something that could have changed everything, and that attracted unwanted attention. She wasn't a traitor, Jake. She was a hero. The intensity of Daniel's statement made Jake's heart race. Heroine? Jake said, repeated, incredulity mixed with a new kind of pain. How can I believe you? I spent months wondering if betrayal was present in our relationship. Now you come along and tell me she was fighting for something bigger? I understand your doubt, but what I'm telling you is true. Laura came very close to discovering something that involved corruption and abuse of power. She was willing to pay the price for that. Daniel took a step forward as if to establish a connection. I saw her passion, Jake, and she was an incredible woman, full of life and courage. Jake felt his emotions stirring inside him. The idea that Laura hadn't betrayed him, but had fought for an ideal, began to redefine her image in his mind. Why didn't you tell me this before? He allowed himself to ask, a mixture of anger and sadness still present in his voice. I couldn't. It was risky. Every day, there was more danger. And now, you're also at risk because of the discoveries you're making. They won't stop here. Daniel looked around as if he feared someone was listening. So what do I do now? Jake whispered, the pain of losing Laura mixing with a new purpose that was beginning to grow inside him. You need to continue her fight. Use your art to expose the truth she was so determined to reveal. Daniel paused, watching Jake with a look of understanding. It's the only way to honor her memory and ensure that her death was not in vain. Jake felt the gravity of Daniel's words. The pain of losing Laura was still fresh, but now there was a new flame of determination beginning to glow inside him. He couldn't let Laura's struggle be forgotten. With a deep sigh, Jake realized that he was ready to face the unknown, not only for the memory of his wife, but also for the truth that needed to be revealed. Jake was in a state of shock. The undercover agent's revelations echoed in his mind like a deafening drum. She was trying to expose something much bigger, Jake. And it cost her her life, said the man. Jake's gaze was lost on the horizon, where the waves broke gently on the beach. He felt like the ground had been ripped out from under his feet. But how could I have missed it? How come I didn't know anything? Jake asked, his voice shaky, almost pleading. The agent, a man with a serious, tired expression, sighed before answering. Laura was a strong woman. She didn't want to worry you. And besides, she was fighting a battle that you couldn't take part in. She didn't want you to feel guilty for not being able to protect her. The weight of guilt and pain was piling up in Jake's chest. He had always thought that he knew Laura deeply, that they shared everything. Now, he realized that there was a part of her that he had never understood. But I loved her. I would have done anything for her, he murmured, the tears threatening to run down his aged face. The agent leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but firm. She knew that, Jake, and that's exactly why she kept her distance. As the waves continued to lap the sand, Jake felt a mixture of relief and despair. So her death wasn't an accident, it was part of something much bigger? He asked, trying to put together the pieces of the puzzle that now lay before him. The agent nodded, pulling out a folder of documents from his backpack. Look at this. Jake picked up the papers, his hands trembling. With every page he turned, his heart squeezed tighter. There were reports, emails, messages showing Laura's connection to a group of artists who were trying to uncover a corruption scheme at local level. She was threatened, Jake, the agent continued, and she wasn't alone. There were other people involved, other lives at stake. But why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone tell me? The indignation in Jake's voice was palpable. The agent looked at him, his eyes expressing deep empathy. Because often people who are fighting injustice don't have support. They prefer to protect those they love, even if it means carrying the weight themselves. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. The image of Laura, vibrant and full of life, was now mixed with an image of her as a lone fighter, facing forces far greater than he could have imagined. I always thought her death was an accident, a tragic fatality, he said, his voice breaking. It was an accident, yes, but not in the way you imagine. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the people who threatened her didn't care who was around her. She became a target for her art, for her truths, the agent explained, his voice carrying a weight of sadness. So, everything I knew about her was an illusion? Jake felt her life crumbling before him, like a house of cards. The agent denied it with his head. No, Jake, Laura was real. The part of her you knew was real. But she had a side that was fighting for justice, and that made her vulnerable. Silence fell between them as Jake tried to come to terms with his new reality. He felt lost and at the same time closer to Laura than ever before. He wanted to understand. He wanted to honor her memory. But how could he do that, knowing that there were so many hidden truths? I didn't know she was in danger, Jake said, his voice almost a whisper. If I had known, maybe I could have saved her. Maybe I could have saved her. Jake, you can't blame yourself. Laura made difficult decisions, and she did it out of love. What you can do now is give her a voice. Use what you've discovered to continue her fight, the agent suggested, staring into Jake's eyes. Art is a powerful tool. You can use it to expose the truth, to give Laura the recognition she deserves. The agent's words penetrated Jake's mind, like a ray of light amid the darkness of his pain. He felt that somehow he was beginning to understand Laura again, not just as his wife, but as a strong and determined woman. You're right, he murmured, a new purpose beginning to take shape inside him. She deserves to be remembered as a fighter. The agent smiled, pleased with the new determination that was beginning to shine in Jake's eyes. Exactly. And now, you have the chance to do it. Jake was immersed in a sea of emotions, his mind churning with everything he had discovered about Laura. The revelation of her involvement in a corruption scheme and the threats she faced had left him at a moral crossroads. He walked around the studio, surrounded by his unfinished canvases, each one reflecting the confused state of his soul. The pain of loss still consumed him. But now, there was a new flame burning inside him, a desire to honor Laura's memory in a way that she truly deserved. I can't let this remain silent, Jake muttered to himself as he looked at the brushstrokes of a painting Laura had started before her death. She didn't want to be forgotten, and neither do I. As she was thinking this, Clara entered the studio, bringing with her an air of determination. Jake, are you all right? You look different, she said, concerned, but at the same time recognizing the spark of purpose that was beginning to shine in his eyes. I'm trying to decide what to do with all this, Jake replied, his voice shaking. The truth about Laura, about what she was fighting. I can't just let her go. She deserves more. You have to share this, Jake. Art is a powerful form of communication, Clara insisted, her passion for artistic expression shining through in every word. If you create an exhibition, you can show the world who Laura really was and what she did. It can inspire other people not to be afraid to fight for the truth. Jake pondered what Clara had said. He had never thought of using his art to expose injustices, but now the idea pulsed in his mind like a new beginning. "Do you really think it can make a difference?" he asked, his insecurity still present. "Absolutely. Art has the power to touch hearts and minds. If people know what happened to Laura, maybe they can unite and fight against what silenced her," Clara replied, her voice full of conviction. The idea began to take shape in Jake's mind. A big exhibition. Maybe I can mix her works with mine. Show the side of her that I never knew, but that I now feel is part of me. Clara smiled excitedly. "That's perfect. We can bring together other artists who have also supported Laura. Together, we can create something incredible." Clara's excitement was contagious, and Jake felt his passion for art reborn inside him. "All right, let's do it. Let's honor Laura the way she deserves," he said, determination growing in his chest. Over the next few days, Jake and Clara worked tirelessly. They met with other artists who knew Laura and who were also willing to help. The atmosphere in the gallery they had chosen for the exhibition was vibrant, full of life and creativity. The idea of bringing out the truth about Laura brought everyone together, and each artist brought their own interpretations of Laura's life and struggle. "Jake, are you ready for this?" Clara asked on a particularly intense day at work as they organized the works in the gallery. "It's a big step, and I know you're still dealing with the pain." "I know, Clara," Jake replied, a mixture of anxiety and hope in his voice. "But I feel it's what I need to do. For me, for Laura. If I don't do it, it'll be as if her life has been in vain." "Then let's go ahead," Clara said, holding Jake's hand for a moment. "Let's do this together." Jake smiled, feeling stronger with her support. He knew that this was the best decision he could make. With every piece they hung, every poem they read, Laura's image became clearer, more vivid. He was beginning to understand not only the woman he loved, but also the artist she was, a woman who cared deeply for others and who fought against the injustices that surrounded her. The opening day of the exhibition was approaching, and Jake's anxiety was palpable. He was about to exhibit not only Laura's art, but also the truth he had discovered. And in doing so, he felt he was finally freeing himself from the chains of grief, turning his mourning into a tribute to the life and struggle of his beloved. "I'm ready," he muttered to himself as he adjusted one of the screens, determined to share the story that needed to be told. Jake's journey was just beginning, but he knew that by honoring Laura, he was also finding a new purpose in his own life. The opening day of the exhibition had finally arrived, and Jake felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement pulsing through his chest. The walls of the gallery were adorned with the works he had meticulously prepared, each one not just an artistic representation, but a piece of Laura's story, told through her struggle and passion. The soft light of the room reflected off the paintings, creating a play of shadows that seemed to dance around them, as if the spirits of Laura and her art were present, watching and smiling at what was about to happen. As the community gathered, Jake could see familiar and unfamiliar faces, all united by their love and admiration for Laura. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. "I can do this," he muttered to himself as he looked at the first piece, a portrait of Laura on a sunny day, her eyes shining with joy. She deserves it. As the clock ticked towards the opening, Jake plucked up his courage and climbed onto the small stage set up at the back of the gallery. He felt all eyes on him, and for a moment, insecurity almost paralyzed him. But then memories of Laura flooded his mind, and he found strength in his memory. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Today, we gather not only to celebrate art, but to honor the life of an extraordinary woman, my wife, Laura." The audience listened attentively, and Jake continued, sharing the discoveries he had made during his search for the truth. Laura has always been a rebellious artist, a defender of truth and freedom. What many people don't know is that her life was full of challenges. She was involved in exhibitions that denounced injustice, and her death, well, it was more complex than I could have imagined. He pointed to one of the works, a colorful mural depicting Laura's struggle against the system. This piece symbolizes her courage in standing up to oppression, and every brushstroke here represents the passion she had for her beliefs and for those she loved. The murmur of recognition among the audience made his heart race, and he could see tears in some people's eyes. During his presentation, Jake made a point of mentioning Laura's friends who had contributed to her journey. "I'm not the only one who misses her. Many of you here today have been touched by the light that Laura radiated. She's not gone. Her art and her legacy live on in each and every one of us." As soon as he had finished, a wave of applause echoed through the gallery. Jake smiled, feeling a weight being lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't just sharing Laura's story. He was connecting everyone there, uniting their memories and their struggles into one purpose. After the performance, many people came up to praise him and share their own stories about Laura. "She inspired me to fight for my rights," said one woman, her voice breaking. "Her art opened my eyes to the injustices we face every day." Jake was touched by every testimony, every word of gratitude and recognition. He realized that despite the pain he had carried, there was still room for hope. He was finally honoring Laura's memory and at the same time allowing himself to let go of the pain of loss a little more lightly. At the end of the evening, as the gallery began to empty, Jake sat in a corner, surrounded by paintings that now seemed to glow with a new light. He looked at the starry sky through the window, sensing that Laura was there, watching and smiling. "I did it, my love," he whispered, tears of joy streaming down his face. "I managed to honor you." And for the first time in a long time, he felt he was ready to move on, taking with him the legacy of love and courage that Laura had left him. After the exhibition, Jake felt that a new phase of his life was about to begin. The event not only brought him closure on Laura's life, but also connected him to a network of friends and art admirers that she had left behind. As he walked through the gallery, his heart was still pounding with the energy of the night before, full of laughter, conversation, and an emotion he hadn't felt for a long time. It was then that a group of Laura's friends approached, smiling with a twinkle in their eyes. Among them was Clara, the rebellious artist who had become a close friend of Jake's during his journey of discovery. "Jake!" exclaimed Clara, with infectious enthusiasm. "We're organizing a community art project and we'd like you to join us. Art has the power to heal, and we need you." Jake hesitated for a moment. He was so used to loneliness and pain that the idea of getting involved in something new seemed daunting. However, as he looked into the hopeful faces of Clara and the others, he felt a wave of warmth and belonging. "I'd love to join in," Jake replied, his voice trembling slightly. "I think it's time for me to reconnect with art and people." As the days went by, Jake dedicated himself to the community project. He and the other artists gathered in an abandoned space in the city, transforming it into a vibrant studio full of color and life. The murals took shape, each brushstroke becoming an expression of hope and renewal. Jake felt he was finally giving new meaning to the pain he had carried. One afternoon, while painting a mural paying homage to Laura, Clara approached. "Do you remember what Laura always said about art?" she asked, leaning on one of the freshly painted walls. She believed that art could be a form of protest, but also of healing. "You're doing it, Jake. You're following her legacy." Those words resonated deeply inside Jake. He turned to Clara, his eyes shining. "I didn't know art could be so powerful. Being here, surrounded by all of you, it's like meeting Laura again, in a different way." Clara smiled, her gaze full of understanding. "She lives on in each of us who loved her. And you're doing more than honoring her memory. You're creating something that can inspire others to find their way too." Jake smiled, feeling lighter with each passing day. He realized that although Laura's loss had left an indelible mark on his heart, there was room for joy and creation. Through art, he was not only dealing with his pain, but also celebrating the life of the woman who had touched him so deeply. In a moment of reflection, as he watched the mural take shape, Jake remembered all Laura's laughter and the dreams she had. "I'm going to do this for you, Laura," he muttered to himself as the sun set over the horizon. "I'm going to continue your fight and carry your message forward." Finally, Jake found a renewed purpose. He dedicated himself to teaching young artists from the community, sharing the lessons he learned from Laura, and encouraging them to explore their own voices. With each class, he felt his connection with her grow stronger, as if she were by his side, guiding him. Jake and Laura's story was no longer just about loss, but about love, courage, and the ability to start again. He knew that the pain would never completely disappear, but now it coexisted with hope and the determination to make a difference. Jake was ready to move on, not as a broken man, but as a full artist, carrying the legacy of his beloved in every brush stroke he made. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.